Written a lot of works on African theology. It's over 30 years now, my research has been on African theology, African evangelization in Africa. As you can see, my book, Trends in African Theology, which came out from the research I made in my doctorate. And as you can see, the book is also, it has its own Italian edition. This is it, La Teologia Africana e l'Evangelizzazione. La Teologia Africana e l'Evangelizzazione. And I have more than 100 articles dealing on African theology and evangelization in Africa, as is already here in my bibliography and also in my website, and so on and so forth. There are also some other little books I have written on African theology. But this is only the beginning of my reflection on that. And so, what is African theology? The African theology is a systematic reflection of Africans, a systematic reflection on the mystery of Christian faith from an African perspective. How do Africans understand the mystery of God in Jesus Christ? Using the African idioms, ingredients, worldviews, alongside with the scripture, alongside with the Christian tradition, focalizing attention on the African context. And so, talking about who is Christ, for example, for the Africans, from an African perspective, that is an aspect of African theology. This becomes an African Christology. Talking about what is the Christian community for an African, that is, what is the church for an African? Talking about it using African expressions, African idioms, African cultural values, elements, from traditional religions and cultures. For example, during the Synod on Africa in 1994, the bishops, thanks to the input of African theologians, came up with an African ecclesiology of the church as family of God. And you know what family means for the Africans. It's not just the nuclear family in the general or Western understanding of family, but this is a kind of a large family. It is a family that goes beyond husband and wife and their children. And it does not just only the living, but it includes also the ancestors, what John Mbiti calls the living and dead. The ancestors who are dead but alive and participate in every function, every activity, every life of the families that are still living in flesh. It includes also those yet to be born. So this is the large family we're talking about when we talk. So that is what we mean by African ecclesiology, talking of what is the church from an African perspective, in an aspect of African theology, the African spirituality as well. So that is to say that the African theology is a reflection on Christian mystery from an African perspective, using African idioms, African religious and cultural values, African worldview, displaying the mystery of Christ, alongside the traditional sources of theology, which is scripture and the Christian tradition. The areas where African theology has actually developed much is in this area of inculturation, which you have explained before. Because be it the African Christology, African ecclesiology, African spirituality, African liturgy, all of them are efforts of inculturation. And that is why African theology enters more more or less within this ambient of missiological reflection. Or African theology is not like the effort that is being made in some other places. They are not questioning the mystery of God. No, but it's a kind of expression of joy of the gospel that has come to us in Africa. The embracing of that the gospel, it is even the celebration of that gospel through theological reflection. How to make that gospel of Jesus Christ has reached to us in Africa reach the heart and soul of every African through our culture, through our anthropology, through our values, living it in our societal systems, and so on and so forth. So it is not trying to say that the African understanding of God is higher or this, or the African way of mediation is this or that. No. But the newness of Christ's event now being embraced by Africans, the joy of that newness of Christ's event, which has come to fulfill the religious yearnings of our phobias, so that our traditional religion actually becomes the way the divine providence prepared the people of Africans for the coming of the gospel through proclamation of the gospel. So that is what African theology tries to prove in the area of infiltration. At the early stages, the development of African theology, we have also what we call the African theology of liberation. That is the area of human promotion. And it is a kind of a theology that actually specializes in discussing the oppressive core elements, political, economic system in Africa. It looks at African history before, during, and after the colonial era. These structures of oppression, oppressive structures that are still present in Africa, that are still holding African down. So, theology of liberation discusses that. How are we to come out of this? The contribution of theology, African theology, in addressing societal problems, political problems, economic problems, social problems, and all these things. Today, that theology is developing more and more, because after that second trend, we have the third trend, what we call the theology of reconstruction, African theology of reconstruction, which was championed more by African Protestant theologians. Yes, we are talking of after the exile of people of Israel in Babylon. And when they came back, the first thing they began, looking at the book of Nehemiah, the Ezra, was the reconstruction. And the reconstruction started with the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem. So God is at the center, but it's helping the people to rebuild themselves with focus on God. And so the attention then is reconstruction. Reconstruction now, the center is Christ. The center is Christ, so that we put Christ at that market of economy, the market of all these dictators, instead of them being the market that is still, because now we have Christ as the ethics of African life, of African way of doing things, of African administrative ways in politics, in economics, in religion, in sociology, and so on and so forth. And now also that African theology of reconstruction has grown. People are paying attention now to the area of justice and peace, to the area of reconciliation, looking at what is going on today in many countries of Africa, of conflicts because of differences in religion, in ethnicity, or because of the colonial boundaries that mix up people of diverse cultures and their ethnicity without respecting these national boundaries. It has caused a lot of atrocities and killings and genocide and pogroms in many African countries. And so the theologians are looking for a way to address these issues. They are talking now in terms of integrated theology, in which both the theology of inculturation, liberation, reconstruction, all of them will now be summarized in what they call integrative theology. Now, speaks of justice, speaks of peace, speaks of reconciliation, and so on and so forth of African society. So what is the role of theology in the transformation, social transformation of Africa? That is the question African theology is battling with today. Yeah. I just received the information from the Amasia Gaba Publications, Eldoret in Kenya, and the Catholic University of East Africa, that they have nominated my book. This book actually was a Christian theology of African religion, issues of interpretation and mission, that they have nominated it as the best-selling book for the year 2016. And so that they have awarded me the best-selling author for the year 2016. So they are inviting me to come and receive my certificate and awards during the international conference, International Writers Conference, that will take place in Eldoret campus of the Catholic University of East Africa from 19th to 21st of September 2017. And that my award will take place on the opening ceremony of this conference, of International Conference of Writers in Kenya. There's nothing more I can say other that I felt elated, because to tell you the truth, I have already forgotten that I wrote the book. The book was published in 2005. And you know, when this book came out, it was appreciated by all and sundry. But at the same time, it was not welcomed in some quarters here. That is understandable. Because I was accused of writing so much about Africa and citing African authors whom nobody knows about, and that I was trying to say that Africans have concept of God which they don't have, that I was superimposing African concept of God, supernaturality over and above of Christ. And that made me to carry a cross for over almost 10 years. And for this award to come at the conclusion of that Calvary, unexpected, for me, is a way. God, you have to understand the saying that at the end of every tunnel, there is a light. And I believe that those in Kenya, the Catholic University of East Africa and Amasia Geba Publications, do not know about this story. They do not know about this story. But the fact is that people have been buying this book, and I know the book has entered into many editions and all over. So it is a great pleasure for me, and I'm very, very happy to the Amasia Gaba Publications. Amasia means the Association of Member Episcopal Conferences of East Africa. So the publishing house is owned by a publishing house that is owned by the Episcopal Conference of Catholic Bishops of East Africa. And just as the university there, the CUA is also owned by the same Bishops Conference. And so from my West African Nigeria, and here in Autobaniana in Rome, I got recognition in East Africa. So I'm very happy that this thing is happening in Africa, because I also said in my acknowledgement there that I thank the Umasia for publishing this book, especially in Africa, because Africa has been my target, my audience, the focus of my research. And I don't intend to go to go back on that. Because after this book, I published another book to complement it. And that is Christianity and Traditional Religions, Orientations for Pastoral Approach. So I took the traditional religions in general, but with attention at African traditional religion. And this one has also run out of a catalog. People are issuing for more publication, for more edition. I think and the publishers have also gone up to the third publications. So on and so forth. So that you can imagine, to say this thing is to tell you how happy I am and how grateful I am to the committee of Amasia Gaba Publications and the Catholic University of East Africa for choosing my book, recognizing my book, and therefore recognizing me. I hope I will be there on that ceremony day, God willing, on 19th of September 2017, to physically be present and express my joy and my appreciation for this award and for this recognition. And this year, because I have spent a lot of my energy, all my research have been on Africa and African focus, have many titles, more than 200 articles, monographs on Africa, theology, evangelization, social issues, and so on and so forth. But this is the first time I'm receiving this type of honor and award. So you can imagine how elated I am. So I thank God for it, and I thank all those who have given me the support and appreciation for that. Yes, so this is what I can say on this.